Oh, what a mighty God we serve. Don't you give God some praise for our choir? Quite a few missing, but they still sung us happy today. Praise God for that. Let's look at 1 Corinthians chapter 9. 1 Corinthians chapter 9. When you get home, you need to read all of that chapter. I'm not going to try to read all of it today, but look at least at a few of those verses. 1 Corinthians chapter 9. 1 Corinthians chapter 9. Am I not an apostle? Am I not free? Have I not seen Jesus Christ our Lord? Are not ye my work in the Lord? If I be an apostle unto others, if I be not an apostle unto others, yet doubtless I am to you, for the seal of mine apostleship are ye in the Lord. Mine answer to them that do examine me is this: have we not power to eat and to drink? Have we not power to lead about a sister as a wife, as well as other apostles, and as the brethren of the Lord and Cephas? Are I only, and Barnabas? Have not we power to forbear working? Who goeth a warfare any time at his own charges? Or who planted a vineyard and eateth not of the fruit thereof? Of who feedeth a flock and eateth not of the milk of the flock? So are these things as a man, or said not the law the same also? For it is written in the law of Moses, thou shalt not muzzle the mouth of the ox that treaded out the corn. The God take care for oxen, or said he it all together for our sakes? For our sakes, no doubt, this is written, that he that ploweth should plow in hope, and he that transieth in hope shall be partakers of his hope. If we have sown unto your spiritual things, is it a great thing if we shall reap your carnal things? If others be partakers of this power over you, are not we rather? Nevertheless, we have not used this power, but suffer all things, lest we should hinder the gospel of Christ. Skip down to verse 16. For though I preach the gospel, I have nothing to glory of, for necessity is laid upon me. Yea, woe is unto me, if I preach not the gospel. Look at verse 23. And this I do for the gospel's sake, that I might be partaker thereof with you. Know ye not that they which run in a race run all, but one receiveth the prize? So run that ye may obtain. And every man that striveth for the mastery is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible. I therefore so run, not as uncertainly, so fight I, not as one that beateth the air, but I keep under my body, and bring it into subjection, lest that by any means, when I have preached to others, I myself should be a castaway. I want to talk about preacher privileges. Preacher privileges. I don't really like preaching sermons like this. It sounds like I'm trying to help myself. But at the same time, as I've shared with you before, I have seen a lot of preacher pastor abuse. And I feel it's my obligation to share with you the Word of God as it relates to how we are obligated to take care of the man of God. I don't want you to just think this is about preachers, because it's not just common to preachers, it's common to Christians. That you'll find in life the people you do the most for are the very folk who will appreciate you the least. And you have to receive a greater motivation for doing right other than being appreciated. It's like parents with children. You know that the most you do for your children many times go unappreciated until they themselves become parents and realize the sacrifices you've made. So that I want to encourage all of us to do a greater job for the Lord. The Apostle Paul writes at a time when he has been challenged. His apostleship has been called into question. And so now, after this long presentation, he addresses this particular point. I think I ought to tell you that not only is Paul's apostleship questioned, but there are people who will question your Christianity. There are people who are quick to say, and you call yourself a Christian. Just like they say, and you call yourself a preacher. The devil is always trying to plant seeds of doubt in your mind, that there are folk who, instead of encouraging you, will do all they can to discourage you. Do I have a witness here? And that's why it's so important for those of us who make up the family of God, that we put more energy in trying to encourage each other than we do trying to tear one another down, because encouragement is so much needed. Are you praying with me today? So then we want to look at this particular passage and watch this preacher. When he comes to this passage, Paul uses that term examiners. So I wanted to start it there. Eliminating examiners. Eliminating examiners. Paul says, I'm being examined. I'm being called into question because of my apostleship. And isn't it amazing how folk always want to look at the church under a microscope, and they go everywhere else and just take things for granted. They don't question a history book that says Columbus discovered America. But they want you to prove that the Bible is what the Bible says. How do you discover a place and people are already there? How do you discover a place and people are already living there? But you say Columbus discovered America, but you want me to prove that God is alive. I wish I had a witness here. And you remember that story about the atheist who went to God and said, God, I want to prove to you that man is able to do a whole lot on his own. We have advanced in so many ways, and let's just have us a contest. I want you to make a man and I'll make a man, and we'll see if you really all that you claim to be. And said the atheist stooped down and took a handful of dust, and God said, wait a minute, get your own dust. I wish I had a witness here. God is in a class all by himself, because he swaps out on nothing and said, let there be. Do I have a witness here? Paul shows us a real beautiful method of dealing with your critics. When Paul, what he does is he starts listing his credentials and all of the privileges that God had afforded him. That as an apostle, he had certain privileges. He had a right to go to people's house and be taken care of. He had a right for the church to provide for him his carnal needs. He had the right to have a wife, even though he didn't have one, and have the church take care of that wife. Oh, I wish I think I want to tell you that's amazing. When I was married, I'm not married now, and that's another problem with some folks. But when I was married, they always would tell me, "Why didn't you bring your wife with you? Why didn't you bring your wife with you?" As though I could bring her for free. They barely were giving me enough money to feed me. I mean, how you gonna feed all this on $25 a day? You can make it to McDonald's 3 meals, but when you run with the fellas I run with, I went with one buddy, he took me out and we went to a restaurant, and the first meal, Sister J, was over $50-something, and I only had 25 a day. I done killed 2 days and I ain't been there 5 minutes. Y'all don't hear me. But then they want me to bring my wife too, but you don't want to wait to pay wife money. That when you have an extra person in the hotel, they charge you more money. Your wife got to eat too. And so that we always have reasons for trying to criticize somebody else when we don't want to take on our responsibility. You see the list there. Paul goes down this list of his credentials and his privileges that he was afforded as being a child of God. And sometimes when people are trying to tear you down, you need to remember who you are. You shouldn't let folk mess up your self-esteem. I find out a lot of folk are real messed up in the head because you've allowed people to damage your self-esteem. You don't know who you are. You need to understand that you are a child of God. You have to apologize to anybody for being who you are. You have to apologize for the blessings God has given you. You got haters all over the world, and there's some folk who will hate on you because God has been blessing you, and they haven't received what you've received, and they want to act like you've been doing something wrong. You ain't got to rob a bank for God to bless you. God can bless you. You ain't got to win a lottery to live good. You can do the right things in life, and God will still bless you. You don't have to have $1 million to drive a Lexus. I can testify to that. But if you can just be a good steward over what God has blessed you with, you can live in a nice house, in a nice neighborhood, and drive a nice car. That you don't have to have all that the world has in order to be happy. Do I have a witness here? The Apostle Paul, he lists those things, and he says those things that I'm talking about is not something I just thought about from the top of my head. He says Mosaic law said that was something that should be done. He said God told Moses to tell us you should put a muzzle on the ox so he can't eat while he's working. Oh, y'all don't hear me. You know what I found out? People will care more about an animal than they care about you. Folk will feed a hungry dog before they feed hungry people. They'll pay $1 million to save a whale, but they won't feed those people hungry under that bridge over there. That we care more about animals. I don't have no problem with you being an animal lover, but I came up in a time when dogs were on the outside. Y'all don't know what I'm talking about. See, when I was coming up, Brother Jefferson, they had a dog house in the backyard. Now the house in the back is your house. Oh, I wish I had a witness here. And the dog lives in the big house. Y'all pray for y'all, Pastor. But I see these commercials where the dog is tearing up the furniture, and he got the sofa scratched up and the lamp turned over, and then they say you should send your dog to dog training school. I said, no, you need to go to some doctor yourself. You got some mental problems. That's it. I'm going to let my kid mess up my house. Y'all help me out. Paul said, you got to understand that we are children of God, and we have privileges and rights as children of God. And just like you shouldn't muzzle an ox, Paul said, do you think God is just talking about cows? He ain't just talking about cows. He's talking about all of us who minister and labor in ministry. You have the right to reap the benefits from ministry. You ain't going to have no farmer planting crops. He planting corn, and you want to let him get a ear of corn. You can't have a man, he around there planting tomatoes, and you won't let him eat a tomato. Something wrong. I mean, they used to have sharecroppers, but they would let you borrow their land and plant crops, and you had to pay a portion of the crops to the landowner because you are planting crops on his land. But at least easy that you keep some of it. Nobody will ask you to plant a crop and you can't keep any of it. But why is it when it comes to church, you want people to labor in ministry and not to reap any of the benefits from ministry? I wish I had a witness here. Paul said, now God has no problem with that. And then finally he said something that's real scary to me. It's real scary to me because he said, you are proof of my apostleship. I mean, if anybody doubt that I'm an apostle, you should doubt that I'm an apostle, because I have proven my apostleship by the seeds I planted in your life. If anybody knows God sent me, you ought to know it. I said that's scary, because if you think about it, if the proof of my ministry is you, there are some of you who don't give me much proof. It's scary, I tell you. Then I found out in ministry you always have some folk who don't appreciate what you're giving. Because there are some folk who don't value the food of the ministry. You see, you can appreciate good food if you like to eat good food. But you can't appreciate a good cook if you don't like to eat in the first place. And there are a lot of folk who don't like spiritual food in the first place. So you're not going to value a chef if you want to dine in the first place. I wish I had a witness here. Have you found out every time you decide you want to dine, that's when they start showing donuts on TV? They show you pie, that pie look better than ever looked before. That chicken look better, it's roasted and all. They got juices popping from that stuff. I mean, food looks better when you know you're going to fast that day. That's the day, that's what the devil likes. But I found out a lot of folk are on a spiritual fast. They don't want spiritual food from the Lord. They can't appreciate the value of God doing what God does. And therefore, if they can't appreciate the blessings of God, they won't appreciate the source of the blessing. My daddy told me you got to learn how to appreciate whatever people give you. It may not be a whole lot, but if they take the time to give it to you, you ought to say thank you. Do I have a witness here? But you got to catch yourself. If you're not careful, you'll start trying to judge the value of your relationship by what folk do for you. Oh, I wish I had a witness. But I found out folk don't do for you according to how much they love you. Folk are limited to what they do by their economic situation. Y'all don't hear me. So I've learned how to appreciate stuff that folk do, even when it ain't a whole lot. I had a member, she's gone to glory now. She gave me a tie that had all kind of stains on it, like snuff stains and all kind of mess. Already been used, and gave it to me, and she had the biggest smile on her face. And I ain't gonna lie to you, I couldn't wear the tie, but I had to appreciate the fact that she thought enough of me. She said, this is my dead husband's favorite tie, and I wanted you to have it. I didn't value her gift on the condition of the tie. I valued her gift on what she was trying to do. It was my husband's favorite tie, and I wanted you to have it. She had sons, but she didn't give it to one of her sons. She gave it to her pastor. She had some folks she knew she could have given it to some other men, but she chose to give it to me. But that made me feel special, because she was giving me something that was special to her. See, sometimes you value stuff that's special to you, but it don't mean nothing to the folk who gave it to. But when it means something to you, and they gave you the best that they had, you ought to thank God that somebody cared enough to appreciate you that much. I have a witness here. And let me tell you something I found out before. You know, you can go to church and you can talk to 200 people, and they hug and kiss you and say how good a day you had. And 2 people can act a fool and say something ugly to you. You know, if you're not careful, the devil will make you focus on those 2 people and forget me and I'm trying to bless you, God can do some things with us. And when you go around hating, you know what? You can't hate on other folk without something happening to you. You can't tear somebody else's down without you losing some bricks out of your business. You can't try to minimize other folk without minimizing yourself. You can't pull folk in a ditch unless you're in the ditch to put them in. That you got to get on a higher plane, and when you're on a higher plane, God will put folk around you who are on a higher plane, and when you're around the right kind of folk, you can go higher and higher and higher. Oh, help me, Holy Ghost. Yeah, Paul said you got to eliminate the examination. Do I have a witness here? But then he says also you got to elevate expediency. You have to elevate expediency. You remember that saying Paul told us last week? He says, all that is lawful is not expedient. Everything that's lawful is not expedient. All right. There are a lot of things you have liberty to do, but it's not best that you do it. I wish I had a witness here. Paul listed this long list of things that he was afforded, these long list of things he could have had. But then he goes to verse 12 and says, guess what? I didn't ask for any of it. I denied myself all of it. Yeah. I wish I had a witness here. And I'm going to say right here, he said, you need to understand that there are some blessings you could receive that you don't need to receive. You can't receive everything from everybody. Because there's some folk whose spirituality can be contaminated because you receive that which you're supposed to have in the first place. And Paul said, I become all things to all men. Because I understand something, that when I strive to take some gifts that I'm supposed to have, it can cripple some folk. When I'm probably having my mentors, all my mentors, they all were pretty plain fellows. I mean, the mentors I had pastored the larger churches, I thought that they were making buku bucks, only to find that they were sacrificing, barely making ends meet. They didn't really, they weren't trying to help themselves. They were just trying to do the right thing. They made sacrifices so that they could make an impression on folk. You know, there's some folk who, you know, they said, Reverend Haynes, one thing I appreciate about you, you don't beg for money. Well, you know, I understand that as a pastor, you have to kind of mention money every now and then. Because THG don't take God bless you. And many times, the same person who say you don't beg for money